Fantastic, Jared. Thank you very much for that presentation. There's a lot of information there for people to digest, but I really appreciate that. And you said the dreaded six-letter word here in Canada, beaver, and that's generated a lot of interest in the old Slido charts. So and I don't know about you folks, but everywhere you go, there's always somebody asking about beaver. We just got to do this, or we just got to do that. Everybody's got their own opinions about that, and that's one of the top questions we're going to ask you here right now. And so, what would you say to those that are against or actively remove beaver dams and or beaver dam analogs? Due to them being thought as barriers to an anadromous fish passage. Is there legitimacy to this argument? How have you dealt with that?
Well, I rely on the science, and rely on the fish. There have been extensive pit tag studies and radio tagging studies looking at fish movement around natural beaver dams and BDAs, and from diverse places, really dry places like Bridge Creek, Scott Valley in California with Michael Pollock. And I mean, Pollock was looking at juvenile salmon, like 2, 3 inch long fish, and they're getting around these things. So the diversity of flow paths and water depth, doesn't seem to be a problem. There's an old Native American saying that beavers taught salmon to jump. So they've co-evolved. They were in this landscape for millions of years, doing just fine. So to me, it's not really an issue unless you can prove it to be an issue. I think just relying on quote unquote expert opinion or what someone looks at and thinks is probably a mistake. I would follow the science, and as far as I know, the science says that beaver are nothing but beneficial to anadromous fish.
Excellent. So I should get a T-shirt that says "Just Embrace Beavers," something like that.
Yeah, yep. Beavers taught salmon to jump.
Like you don't already have one.
Exactly. Over to you, Jason.
I'll go to the next question on our list, and there's a few questions in our queue that we haven't put up that are along the same lines, and it's around Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous cultural values, and asking about your experience in the inclusion of tribal or Indigenous or First Nations cultural values in consideration of riparian restoration, the existence of traditional ecological knowledge, Indigenous laws around beavers and things like that. And I'm just looking at my screen. The other similar type question it was directed to Janine, and it's around the context of here we're moving towards reconciliation with First Nations communities, and have Indigenous, traditional, or cultural components been incorporated into your restoration projects with local tribes? So I'm taking some liberty and lumping all those couple of questions together, and there are others along that vein in our queue. But Jared, maybe we'd give you first crack at that, but then open it up to the rest of the panel.
Well, I really enjoy working with tribes, and I've had a lot of really beneficial and learning experiences with them. But most often, and I mean, all tribes are different, all people are different, but the tribes that I've worked with really appreciate this kind of approach, this working with nature, this non-heavy-handed approach. Most of them, they, the Mountain Maidu see the Tasman Koyam as family itself. I mean, not only are their family members buried around there, but they think of that ecosystem as part of their family. And to them, it's an insult when we roll out heavy machinery and create a pond and plug project, or really have that heavy-handed engineering approach. They the approach of keeping the heavy machinery on areas that heavy machinery created, keeping them off the meadow surface, working with the plants and the biota, that really resonates with them, and that's been some of our most rewarding and productive partnerships have been with tribal groups, and mostly I try not to talk too much. I want to listen and try and learn from them as much as possible. Of course, they bring me in for my expertise, and I tell them what I think, but I'm really interested in how they see this area, how what they want to see, what restoration looks like to them, and where I can fit in, I try and help them out. But they were there, well before I was, and have a significant history there.
Oh, thanks, Jared. Janine, you were targeted in the question. So did you want to offer a comment on that?
Oh, well, I will do my best. And I think Jared captured it that, with many of our projects, we are working with tribes. They are one of our primary partners, which is fantastic. One of the other areas, I think, for stage zero restoration, where the tribes have taken a huge interest and where we've been able to engage is over Pacific lamprey restoration and lamprey habitat. So we tend to focus on salmon and steelhead, but we've also lost a lot of our lamprey habitat. And so these saturated floodplain areas are prime rearing areas for lamprey, which are so important to the tribes. So I think that's an area where there's a lot of synergy. There's more research going on. A lot of folks look at the fine sediment gets deposited in these depositional reaches, and they think, oh, that's a bad thing. It's actually a fantastic thing for rearing, for fish and for lamprey. So I think that's one of the really strong intersections. It's a really great way to engage with tribes.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Colin. I see you got your hand up there.
I can't match Jared or Janine's experience, but I will tell you a very short story from a project I was involved in just a couple of years ago. On the northern part of one of the islands in the Columbia River, we were trying to reconnect the inland drainage system in the island to the Columbia River. And it was blocked off by tide gates. So we took the tide gates out, but we didn't want complete connectivity, too much longitudinal connectivity. And so we put in some beaver dam analogs. First thing that happened was the beaver that lived on the island, Salvie Island, moved in, chewed off all of our stakes, and then built beaver dams, real beaver dams, in much better locations that we hadn't been able to identify. So they definitely know more about it than we do. But the other thing that we wanted to get back was native vegetation, including wapato. And wapato is a sort of aquatic bulb that was used in numerous ways by native peoples. And we planted wapato, and they all died. And so because it turned out it wasn't quite the right level of hydration. And so we were disappointed about that. Fast forward a year and a half, and there's wapato all over the place that we didn't plant because the bulbs had been there, buried under the post-settlement alluvium all the time that Salvie Island had been used for agriculture. And all it needed was to rehydrate those wetland soils and germinate the bulbs, and they came back on their own. And to me, there's an allegory there to the native people themselves. They never went anywhere either. They were always still here. We just buried them in Western culture. And give them a chance, and they'll blossom too. They'll come back and recover lost systems and recover lost functions, because they never went away either. Just like the wapato, they just got buried.
That's a really great story. Thanks for sharing that, Colin. I'm just looking at the time. We don't have too much before our noon break, but maybe we have time for one quick question. I'll ask the one about what are the important considerations when determining locations for beaver dam analogs? And maybe another way of hearing that question is, what are the showstoppers that would be present if you were thinking of putting a beaver dam analog in?
Well, takes a little experience, but it also takes a little reading. So the Low-Tech PBR manual, give another plug for that, as well as the Beaver Restoration Guidebook that Janine worked on and was a lead author on, are both great sources for answering that question. Just quickly, confluences, bifurcations, places that you can work, where you can put a VDA, depending on, depth, but many times, riffles, kind of not at the top of the riffle, but maybe, at the third point of the riffle, something like that. You know, where would a beaver put one? That's the key, but those are some rules of thumb, but yeah, confluences, bifurcations, yeah, riffles, all kind of lend themselves. But best thing you can do is hope beavers show up. It's like Colin said, we can put them there, but they know where they're supposed to go.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to, well, we are at noon, so let's identify that everybody gets 45 minutes for lunch. Please be prompt. We're going to start promptly right at 12:45, and we're going to come back with Colin to take the next presentation. I think he's going to introduce a case study. So enjoy your 45 minutes. We'll look to see you back here at that time.